Hey everybody, and welcome to the CineFix Top 100, the reality-revealing sunglasses through which we view the hidden intentions behind 100 of the greatest movies of all time. I'm Clint Gage. Joining me, as always, CineFix's very own 6-minute fight scene, Alex Stedman. Alex, how you doing?
I'm great. And what an honor of a title for that one. That is, we'll talk about it. But yeah.
Yeah, we'll get there. And back after his episode and a half sabbatical, alien-friendly Michael Calabro. Cal, what's happening, dude?
Hey, Clint, how's it going, man? Feels good to be back.
It's going. Yeah?
Yeah.
You didn't miss much.
Yeah.
Just an episode and a half is all.
At least it wasn't 2 episodes.
Thematically, it really worked for Ikiru.
Yeah, it was a good bit.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm glad you were able to leverage my pain for content.
Mm-hmm.
That makes me feel good.
That's what
actually.
we do here.
Yeah, that is what we do here.
Yeah, I know. That would have been an enormous oversight on our part.
Because there were 23 hours in that day I could have gotten a kidney stone.
But you got it in that hour.
Where I could have suffered in silence.
I'm glad you're willing to say that because mid-episode, you got a kidney stone.
There were 20.
It showed up right on time.
There were 22 and a half hours in that day that could have happened where I could have suffered in silence. I could have went on with my life. But no, it had to happen for the hour and a half that I was on camera. Mm-hmm. Unbelievable.
It happened while we were under the lights, as they say.
Yeah. To everybody out there, kidney stones are extremely painful. So if you are listening to this, let me do my PSA right now and just go chug a glass of water. Yeah. You got to do your part.
Also, these seats are not the most comfortable seats in the world. So sitting in the seat, that sucks.
Really got to upgrade our seat. You can blame the seat for the
stone,
I think.
Oh.
That's why it started making its way out.
The doctor wants it, so now they have to send it out to test. So I'll tell you who to blame in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
It will be the chair.
Yeah.
I want to know what part of your diet specifically is to blame for the kidney stone.
I don't know. We'll find out.
I didn't know they did
Well,
that.
you have to keep us updated for Kidney Stone Watch 2024. I do have one quick update. This is the most important thing of all time. This Is How I Win Ikiru Uncut Gems mashup t-shirt. It exists and it is available for purchase. There is a link in the description for you to go buy the This Is How I Win t-shirt. I can't tell you how happy that makes me.
And then you get to explain it to all your friends for about 20 minutes if they haven't seen both movies.
Please help us prove to our bosses that people actually watch this show.
You?
Yeah, we need to. I'm not sure what the number is, but there is a certain amount of T-shirts that if we sell that number of T-shirts, then it'll go a long way.
Hey.
But it did take me 25 minutes to explain it to my wife the other night. But God bless her, she listened to all 20 minutes of it, and she did think it was funny by the end.
It's a conversation starter.
It is. It absolutely is. Nothing says I like movies that open on the protagonist's asshole quite like our Uncut Gems Ikiru, This Is How I Win t-shirt. So, get one for the stockings of your entire friend circle. They all deserve it. But that's it. The link is down there.
That's so exciting.
Amazing.
Look at us.
Yeah.
We did it.
Look at us giggling about a t-shirt. In the meantime, we are in episode 5 of our Alone Against the World season, and Dan's algorithm has picked it's as difficult as it is to say. It's picked another winner this week, because as far as being thematically relevant to this theme, this movie is exactly right on the money. We're gonna watch John Carpenter's They Live.
Yeah, you're right, because we were talking in the Anchorman episode about that one being a little borderline. This one, there's nothing borderline about this one.
Borderline what?
Theme. Like, he's alone against the world. He is so alone against the world.
Anchorman was sneaky, though, because it was actually Veronica Corningstone that was alone against the world. That was the one where,
blew my mind.
The main character of the movie was the world. But this one, we're back into a more straightforward alone against the world kind of motif. But from the late 80s, 1988. It's based on a short story that was first published in one of the sci-fi anthologies way back in the 60s, and there was a comic book that they made out of that, and the comic book is what John Carpenter saw to make They Live, and it follows a drifter, guy named Nada, but he's only named Nada in the credits. They don't actually say his name at any point in the movie, but Nada uncovers a vast alien infiltration that's keeping humanity asleep and subjugated and all of that great stuff through subliminal messages and hypnotic suggestions. And this is not a subtle film. I think we can go ahead and say that straight off the bat.
I don't think you're gonna get me.
No arguments from Alex.
No.
But what?
That's part of its charm.
The usual first question, Cal. What's your experience with this movie? What was the first time you saw it?
I saw this movie for the first time in college. Right before this, I knew John Carpenter for horror. Right, so whether it's Thing, Halloween, movies like that, I saw them. But like once you get into college and you start making shitty short films, you start to have an appreciation for people that can really succeed at low budgets. And then that's when I like started to see the seams in Halloween, and I was just like, I need to just watch all of this guy's movies. And then I subsequently went and did that. And when I got to They Live, I realized, in my personal opinion, I think this film is his greatest accomplishment, without question. I know you may disagree, but
I feel like I need a moment after.
We'll save the disagreeing for a moment.
Halloween started a genre, but this guy managed to pretty accurately predict the socioeconomic, the socioeconomic environment of America almost in real time 40 years ago. There is no movie coming out in 1988 that even begins to approach the political relevancy of this movie, in not only in the time, but as it is aged throughout the decades. And while Halloween is a fun popcorn movie, like this is a very schlocky sci-fi film that actually has something extremely important to say. And it is very, 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 very hard to toe the line of having a WWE superstar like Roddy Piper just like roll into a bank and say, I'm here to like kick ass and chew bubblegum, and I'm all out of bubblegum. And as profoundly dumb as that line is, but expertly delivered by a man that could only have been brought up in the world of kayfabe, to have that movie have such thematically deep political takes is incredible. There's just not a lot of movies that succeed at doing the farcical, like the light and the heavy at the same time.
Okay, well the question was, when did you see it first? So what?
So college. That's
college. Okay,
yeah.
Great. Yeah. No, it's funny. It is all of those things that you said in looking at the subject matter of the premise of the movie, which is aliens they've hidden messages underneath all of the modern trappings around you and everything. And the idea of subliminal messages and the idea of hidden meanings that are influencing us and we're not aware of it and all of that, like it is interesting that every choice that they made, even like it's in the Starship Troopers school of like so bad it's good.
To your point, this is very much like a low budget Verhoeven movie.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, some of that schlock and some of that B movie stuff is like, it's easy to give it like all the credit you want to, right? Like you can give it credit for being brilliantly lampooning everything, and in very intentionally hiding his own meaning underneath a very unsubtle veneer, and that is the entire point of the movie. And there's all kinds of. It's really a great movie that you can give as much credit as you're willing to give it. Cal, you're obviously giving it all of the credit in the world. But Alex, what about you? When was the first time you saw it? Was it yesterday?
It was, yesterday. And I feel like I have almost like the exact opposite view of like Carpenter movies as you do. I like my guy in horror. Like Halloween is top tier for me. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it because I bet I forced it onto the list if I didn't if I did that single handedly. No, I
might be.
Yeah. For me, so I watched it for the first time. I had heard a lot about it, obviously. Really struggled through the first 30 minutes. And then it gets to its thesis.
Did you pause it?
I started watching it on Wednesday, and then I was like, I can't do this.
That's why you stumbled over, was it yesterday when you watched it? Because it was actually across 2 days?
I messaged Clint and Cal saying, does this movie get entertaining, essentially? And I realized I had not gotten to the glasses part yet. Yeah. That was on me. No, here's the thing. My counter argument, although I didn't hate the movie, is I see the socio-political ideas, and they are quite prescient. I just feel like the execution is a little silly. And there's nothing wrong with that. But actually, I had a good time watching it after the first 30 minutes. Yeah. It's a wild movie.
But see, I think like
it's bananas. Yeah,
it's bananas.
It really is.
I think some of the best political movies have to be a little bit silly because I think like I think only when looking at it from like a humorous lens is like the only time people like take the medicine, right? Like whether like when we look at even other political movies we watch, like Being There, right? Like that's a comedy, and that is a commentary on like the political system. Other more like recent movies which exist because they swim in the wake of a movie like They Live, which is like Sorry to Bother You or the Big Short. Like these political satire movies are the movies that probably get the most cultural reach on political messaging that I think is only possible because they are funny. Because I don't think...
I'm not against like baking in humor into commentary. That's not what I'm saying.
Or funny or genre based in some other way. Because I mean, look at Get Out. It's just similar.
You can bake in
society
comedy
through a bizarre premise. So.
And there is a lot of comedy in this movie. I kind of just I don't like. I enjoyed watching it as fun. I will say, like
it is fun. It's a ton of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't need to litigate how much fun this movie is.
I think after the slog of the first 30 minutes, which nobody ever wants to talk about, those 30 minutes are rough.
That's what it was like being down and out in the Reagan 80s.
Yeah. Will we? Because it's not any of my Artemis scenes.
We'll get to that first 30 minutes here in a second. Yeah, pedigree wise, I mean, John Carpenter. Cal, you already mentioned this is your favorite John Carpenter film
of all time. Yeah,
I do think this is the last of his peak, right? Like this is the tail end because like
big time.
Well, the 70s had Dark Star and Assault on Precinct 13 and on up to Halloween, and he's clearly like on the up in that. And then the 80s, you've got The Fog and Escape from New York and The Thing and Big Trouble in Little China, and then They Live is at the end of the decade, and there's a couple more mixed in there that are. But anyway, by the time you get into the 90s, it's Memoirs of an Invisible Man.
Yeah.
In the Mouth of Madness, which I know
Escape from LA.
That movie has some fans. And his vampires movie, and then he just kind of stops. Right by the late 90s, he was just kind of done. He's continued to work and he's done some smaller things here and there, but like the 80s. That was the moment for John Carpenter, and I think They Live is just right at the tail end of the height of his powers, as it were, But
I do feel like it's one of those movies that wasn't super well received on launch, and then it kind of went through the wait, no, guys, it's actually great. Like
I think that's a lot of Carpenter classics though, because that was the Thing.
The Thing did that too. Yeah, The Thing was not well received when it came out. And looking back at some of the reviews for this, they sound an awful lot like what you've said already, Alex. There's a lot of like, yeah, no, I get the idea and it's cool, but it's kind of a shitty movie.
Yeah, and maybe I'll come to appreciate it more in a year.
But just to critics at the time saying that like this movie is also partially an indictment on them, right? Because this movie is fundamentally about how the media is being weaponized in order to keep people down.
To that point, and I read a really a good American cinematographer article. They get one of the things that a quote from John Carpenter out of that building right off at this point, Cal, is he said, "I find that the biggest movies now, which are making the most money, seem to be anonymous. They're not made by a person. There's nobody there to provide vision. The studios test films in terms of demographics, which results in films that are familiar to everyone and offensive to no one. There's a hypnotic, symbiotic relationship. We give the public what they want, and they sleep through it."
What year did he say that in?
I was gonna say
he said that in 1988. And like, how familiar does that sound?
That's
like,
actually scary.
And that to me is the story of this movie, right? It's B movie, it's schlock, it's got all those trappings, I'm happy to admit that, like I said earlier, give it as much credit as you want. Like maybe he just made an accidentally prescient B movie, or maybe the B movie is part of the prescient, like whatever you wanted to give. But the man had the idea and he knew what he was communicating, and he absolutely did it. And it's, just quotes like that. Just like movies now we put everybody to sleep. We give them what they want and they sleep right through it, which is incredible.
I think he knew exactly what he was doing. What's your favorite quote, Quint? Clint. What's the one quote you always say all the time?
Oh, you talking about Be Where You Are?
Yeah, be where you are, right? Like he wanted to make
Be Where You Are.
He wanted to make this movie, and like, let's be real. I can't imagine the capitalists in Hollywood are just like bending over to give him tens of millions of dollars to make this. So whatever like shoestring budget he could scrape together to make this, like he knew that you were gonna have seams, and it's a compromise he was willing to make in order to have it happen, and that's what's so good about it.
According to Google, the budget was about like $3 million.
Yeah. That's so little money.
No, and he wasn't going to go make a $20 million movie with $3 million.
Yeah.
Like,
no.
He probably made a $2.8 million movie with $3 million.
I'm honestly amazed at how many helicopters he managed to get for $3 million.
Yeah.
Back in
There were
those
a
days,
couple.
you get a bulk deal
Yeah.
on them.
Yeah.
I'm not going to argue that he didn't make the movie that he set out to make. I think he was very aware of what he was doing. I mean, he cast Roddy Piper.
Yeah.
I think he was very aware.
Well, here's the other quote that in that article about Roddy Piper, and I've heard this quote for other places too, but this was in that same ASC interview. But he looks as if he's lived life, as opposed to looking like a Hollywood movie star. He has
That's
a rough
a good
face
point.
with scars from his fights, but it's a kind face. I'd also read that he wanted to do this movie for a couple of years, but then it wasn't until he went to WrestleMania 3 as a fan and met Roddy Piper that he was like, "Oh, Roddy Piper's the guy."
I also I was trying to think of this movie if they had like a really big Hollywood star in that role, if they had like a Tom Cruise or a Brad Pitt. I don't think it would work half as well. For some reason, me not knowing him as well as not a wrestling person made it so much better.
And I mean, I agree with you, because he's just like, I feel like any like traditionally handsome guy, right? Like by the very logic of the film, that person would need to be one of them, you know?
Yeah.
But I mean, I just the idea that you had to work, you know, if people are too beautiful.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
all of a sudden it just doesn't look like. And here's a guy that's just like, you know, and you think about the scene where the street preacher is like, let me feel your face, let me feel your hands. Oh, you're a working man.
Yeah.
It's like that's
like
exactly what John Carpenter was doing.
He does.
Backstage at WrestleMania 3, you know. So.
He looks like a working man, Roddy. You want to be in my movie?
Yeah.
Now your hands. That's for good. Yeah, you're a working man.
Yes, sir.
Let's talk about some brilliant moments.
Does anyone have any in the first 30 minutes?
in the first 30 minutes?
Yeah.
I have one that's the very first thing that we see.
Okay.
Yeah.
The way that the main title shows up. It's like spray painted white on black, and then the rest of the shot fades up and it reveals that They Live is spray painted on a wall, like kind of baked into a bunch of other graffiti, which is a really honestly brilliant way to start this movie about signal to noise ratios and, you know, not being able to see messages that are buried in everything else.
Also, the fact that he just like comes from like the other side of the tracks, you know.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
Like he's a guy from the wrong side of the tracks, like coming to Los Angeles, and the fact that they managed to shoot this and like it looks so grim and dour when it's
LA.
It's LA.
Yeah.
You know,
LA looks like that
now-
once every 15 years.
That is something I feel very strongly about, is how terribly a lot of movies get LA. That's one of the reasons I like Nightcrawler so much. I feel like Nightcrawler really gets LA.
Yeah, LA is just a bunch of dirty concrete.
That's all it is. That's all. And I say this as an Angelino myself. But no, I mean, Cal, you even made a comment yesterday about like how some of the homelessness epidemic in LA looks worse in some places than it does in this movie. It kind of does.
like and that's the thing. Like this was considered probably at the time to be a hyper exaggerated,
Like dystopian
like a hyper exaggerated present. And I honestly think that this might be not better. Better isn't the word to say, but less extreme than the homelessness epidemic that is currently.
Not to jump ahead too far, but during I'm sure we'll talk about the seeing the truth scene where he like there was like one subliminal message in that scene that was like, work 8 hours, play 8 hours, sleep 8 hours. And I was like, y'all are playing for 8 hours?
Yeah. But like, but like that's the thing, right? Like
I'll take it.
The fact that like the Supreme Court is making judgments like this year about things like those homeless encampments is nuts. It just blows my mind how far ahead he was like seeing how bad like Reagan's trickle down economics would does. And this is John Carpenter, by the way, not like some in like doctor of economics who is just some liberal economist that just gets $5,000 every time he shows up on MSNBC.
Yeah,
this is John Carpenter.
To be fair, John Carpenter really hated Reaganomics.
Yeah.
Like if you read the interviews, he hated that.
Hates Reagan, and that's why I love him.
No, but I will say, as much as I complain about the first 30 minutes, and I do maintain they are a slog, I will say the production design is pretty impressive, especially on that low budget, especially when you have like the homeless encampments.
It looks made on the cheap,
for
sure.
Part of the charm.
That doesn't. Yeah, it's part of the deal.
You know what else? Else I love about this movie outside of the first 30 minutes, because it's important that it's set up in the 30 minutes. It's just like how the media functions and how TV functions, and I don't know why it happened in the 80s. But there is a decent amount of 80s movies that have themes that tackle how like we are affected by the media. And that is probably one of my, like favorite plot points or like favorite narrative devices of all time. Like not only is this movie very much on my list, but Clint, when we didn't
You're talking about Videodrome.
Yeah,
I know. You're going to bring up Videodrome.
When we didn't collude to get Cronenberg on this top 100 list, like I love Videodrome, and I think Videodrome also tackles some of the issues about TV and how people are perceiving TV and how it's affecting them in that time. And like that does it. RoboCop as well also has moments, and it's just like all like maybe it was because cable happened and the VCR happened, so now. Not to interrupt, but I think we like looked this up during the RoboCop episode. I think like CNN opened or like launched around. I think it launched around this time.
Cycle,
think about that. From like the 50s to I guess the 80s, you would have had three three channels, and then in the span of that time, not only did you have cable invented and the 24-hour news video cycle and the VCR, so you can like time shift and then like all this stuff. So like now all of this visual media has just been bombarding people's senses in this one particular decade. And I am utterly fascinated with any of these artists making these movies in this time that are trying to like genuinely probe how they feel that they are being affected by the own thing that they are making to put out in their world.
Well, I think too, like part of the thing that you couldn't, like that John Carpenter couldn't have anticipated is like the unique thing about media back then is you were very quickly bombarded with like you were saying, like 3 different channels, but that's also all you had. You had that and the newspapers, where it's like today we have the opposite issue and radio, but like now we have like so many and it's overwhelming. But you also have more freedom as to what you're consuming.
I actually think that makes things less powerful, right? Because like part of the intrinsic power of these 80 media analysis is the monoculture of it all, right? So it needs to be very, very controlled and tight, because now we live in a world where everybody has fucking sunglasses. There's many goddamn truths out there, like truths.
Welcome to my thesis about the loss of the monoculture and how we can't handle it as a society.
They're called alternative facts, Calibro.
Sorry.
I feel like we also don't have enough modern day equivalents of that, though, that are like kind of tackling it in the way that they would have in the 80s. Like I can't really think of a lot of good ones.
Has there been a movie that does this well with social media yet?
No, that's what I'm saying. Like maybe like fine movies.
I mean,
but
that's
nothing
kind
like...
of the analogy of just like the media exploding the way that it did in the 80s versus the media exploding the way it's doing over the past 10, 12 years. Like, is there one that's done that with social media?
I think there was a movie that came close, but it wasn't that good.
What?
And it was called, I want to say it was called Mainstream, and it starred Andrew Garfield.
I just got in my ear with the most obvious choice, Black Mirror.
Oh,
like Black Mirror is the one that's done it.
Sorry. Well, we were talking about
also, it's also a show.
It's not a movie.
Technicality.
But...
Yeah.
No, that's a very good point. Black Mirror does this very, very well. I think that would be the modern day equivalent, but it is a TV show.
So that's why we didn't think of it. You know, the other thing about this first 30 minutes that slows everything way down to me, and this is how do you guys feel about John Carpenter as a composer? The music in this movie like just takes the energy out of everything for me. The just that like slow kind of
You don't like it?
Like jazzy cowboy kind of tune. I don't know what you would call
like
it.
Like the walking bass line and like the twangy guitar.
The funny thing is, I feel like the only time the music really works after I've spent so much time crapping on the first 30 minutes.
It's the first 30 minutes.
It's the first 30 minutes.
It's the first 30 minutes. Well, because it's all working together, right? It's all going at the same speed.
I was thinking of when they're destroying the homeless encampment, and there's like, I would say, an almost horror-inspired score to that scene. It's very like oppressive.
I do think that this first bit is it does get very, very, I don't know that preachy is quite the right word for it, but here's what this movie's about kind of yelling. There's a lot of very on the nose expository monologues. Like Keith David's got one about like, well, here's how it works, man, and then he describes like it's like a race, and they put you on the starting line, and you can't, and that whole there's a couple of different monologues like that are just very explicitly, here's what this movie's about. Like before it goes nuts with the sunglasses and the formaldehyde face. And
I feel like that's why the first 30 minutes kind of bothered me as much as it did. I don't feel like it needed all that. I feel like we would have gotten it. I don't know. Maybe I'm overestimating audiences of the 80s. I
don't know. I mean, I think that was partially going back to that John Carpenter quote. I think that's part of why this movie is so unsubtle. I really think he meant to yell at people.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's what this movie feels like. It just feels like I'm going to yell at you about this thing because it's the only way you'll hear it.
Can I ask you a question? And this is like, how do you be subtle, right, about subliminal messaging? That's what this is, right? Like, that's how...
I think you could. I actually really like Clint's point is maybe it would be kind of hypocritical for it to be subtle. Like, the entire point of the movie is to grab you by the shoulders and be like, snap out of it. Like, yeah. So I kind of, that's a good point.
Part of the tact, though, is like making it look absurd. There's also no small amount of Carpenter sort of directly addressing people in the sense of just like, this is happening to you, you idiots. I think making this kind of the obey and marry and reproduce and all of those great
watch TV
block font, all of that stuff, making it so patently absurd and making these aliens look like total weird ghouls, like and making it a goofy B movie, but this is the actual world that you guys are living in.
Yeah, and if like you need this silly B movie to tell that to you, then reflect maybe. No, I think that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, also just like where this kind of movie originates as well. Like a big part of this and like a big influence on this movie is Barbara Kruger, the artist. And if you go like look at all of her old stuff, like it uses the same font, and it also is not subtle at all. And like to your point, it's the point of the work, right? Mm-hmm. And like that's kind of what's so great about this. And it's weird how this thing comes completely full circle, which is like Barbara Kruger inspires this movie inspires Shepard Fairey, and then Shepard Fairey goes on to make the Obama change poster, which is like kind of hilarious of how the political mainstream can even just over time come to co-opt such a subversive critique of American culture.
Can you believe it? She didn't even go to Lamar's class. I told her, for yourself and for the baby. Go!
When he first puts his sunglasses on and walks through downtown LA, and this is where he's looking around and everything is in black and white, he sees all the messages and he sees the aliens for the first time. I mean, it's a trippy sequence. It really is.
It's a hard thing to shoot, too, right? Because you got to shoot it, then take everything down, then replace everything, and then make sure that even it has, like, the same, like, placement and stuff. Like it's just so well done.
Well, and even if we can get into some of the nuts and bolts of how they shot that. Like, it wasn't just a simple desaturate kind of a job. They didn't shoot it in black and white. They shot, this is another part of this, I'm telling you guys, if you read those American cinematographer articles, they're fascinating. They wanted it to be like super contrasty, that super like really thick kind of chunky black and white from the film noir days, and they shot just about every film stock. They tested a ton of different processes. Then they decided to do some of it on the kinesioscope, which is that old tool that I Love Lucy invented reruns with. You know? Like they shot film off of a TV screen to give it like a digital look, and that was sort of part of the interference. The thinking behind that was like the interference from the signal that was making him see it.
That's cool.
Is kind of it's a little crunchier. But then they painted some black and white matte paintings for some of the big ones. They painted them in black and white, but shot them on color film stock. Like they did all kinds of different tricks. They also shot the whole movie in anamorphic, which is it squeezes everything into a smaller frame before it expands back out in the final print. That made some of the optical tricks that they did harder. So I read this whole thing about, and I'm getting some of the nuts and bolts wrong, because these, again, like we've talked before on the show about how the people that did this stuff are like the smartest engineers of all time in a lot of ways. But instead of what they did to fix that was they shot some of the optical stuff with side-by-side cameras, like a left half and a right half. And then they married those two to match the scope when the scope was unsqueezed out to the full aspect ratio. So it's the hoops they had to jump through to get that black and white looking the way that it does, because it does look cool.
It looks so cool. Like I have to say,
particularly on a $3 million budget, he didn't have time to mess around. But the one important thing with that black and white is it needs to not feel natural. Yeah. Like it needs to feel like something we hadn't seen before. And so just shooting it in black and white would have been a choice. But like going that extra to make it like 10%, like, wait, what am I looking at? Kind of like it doesn't register. And obviously, like I've seen this movie so many times and I never thought twice about what film stock they used for it until I went and looked it up today. But like it was a really difficult, I mean, it's the lamp bump of this movie. Like it was a really difficult process to get it to look exactly this sort of unnatural, half film noir, half shot off a television, half rear projection, black and white matte paintings shot in color. Like they did all kinds of stuff. Wild.
And what I like about it too is it's kind of an escalation of being unsettling. Like you go through the black and white and you see just it looks different and it looks weird and jarring, and then you start to see the weird messages, and then you see your first alien. And that moment where you see your first alien, that's when I messaged you guys and I was like, oh, I'm watching the movie now. Like that was the exact moment.
The movie just started.
Yeah, as soon as he puts on those glasses. And
and he looks at like the first, and there's like the aliens are so gnarly looking. Like they don't look like your typical like green guy. They have those weird eyes. I think you kind of need that escalation, that ramp up to get to that payoff.
Those eyes are great too, because it kind of gives them a pupil without actually giving them a pupil.
It's very gross and weird.
And like rubber masky with the wigs
and hair.
Like,
I love that they have
the ones
hair.
that have mustaches in real life too.
Aliens
the
don't usually have hair.
It's
That scene does it all, and that starts off kind of like a roller coaster, right? So so it goes like from there, then it's like into the grocery store with the little old lady, which he's just like, I put on the glasses, formaldehyde face, and then he like trips, and then like the old lady where it's just like, this one could see, and then it's just like him running away, acing those cops, which is like one of the things that I also want to talk about this, which is definitely a brilliant moment, is how the police are portrayed in this film. And those cops in the street are some of the only cops where you actually see their face. Most of the time, they're just like a faceless mass in riot gear. And I always wonder like where he was looking for inspiration on some of that stuff. I'm sure a lot of it probably had to do with like the DNC in the 60s, right? But like, again, this is 2-3 years. When was Rodney King? Early 90s, right? This is 88. So like when you look at They Live and then you go look at some of the news footage from like the Rodney King protests and stuff like that, it's so Nostradamus just like predicting this stuff. It's wild. This is a $3 million B science fiction film that should have nowhere near the cultural relevance it does.
I mean, but we've also said that about a few movies. I mean, we said that about Being There. I feel like maybe
but that's not a schlocky movie. You know what I'm
saying? Yeah.
Like that's Hal Ashby.
Yeah.
Different guy, different time. Like, not to say that movie is any worse or better. I guess. Yeah. I think people come to this movie with a different set of expectations, and the fact that this film not only delivers on those expectations of just being like a fun, rompy dad movie that's like a little goofy, but then it also it also just has like some of the smartest and most brutal critique of the time.
Well, it's
in
funny
film right there
too, because like in this particular, I would say like 7-minute stretch where like you kind of go through him putting on the glasses and then the bank robbing scene. Maybe that's like 10 minutes. But it's funny because like I think some of the actually more profound moments come in that initial him looking around. Like one of the things that kind of like bowled me over was like the shot of the money, and it just said like this is your god now. Yeah. And I was like, oh, that they kind of went off with that. And then he goes in the grocery store, and I was like dying laughing by some of the conversations that they were having. Like, she bought blue corn tortillas. How dated.
Well, and the choices that he made for locations to go into. Yeah. Right. Like even those are smart. Like he peeks into a hair salon. Yeah. The newsstand is a big one. There's a TV on every corner. The grocery store, like where people go for literal sustenance. Choosing those locations was no accident. Like those are great spots to say lots of meaningful stuff in a very short time, and with no dialogue either. Like he doesn't talk to anybody until, what does he say? He says, "You look like your head fell in the cheese dip back in 1957." You know what? Let's lighten things up for just a second, and just put some love onto Roddy Piper's name real quick. Like this guy. Oh. I mean, I'm a wrestling guy since I was can remember. Like, so like I remember Roddy Piper when he was at the peak in late '80s was like peak Roddy Piper. Like he was a full face at this point. And one of my favorite stories about this is that he used to carry a notebook. He kept a notebook on him. I'm probably blowing a torf, and I'm going to apologize in advance for that. But he kept a notebook on him where he'd write down one-liners that would come to him. If he ever thought of a one-liner, he'd write it down to use it in the ring or to use it in a promo or in Piper's Pit or whatever. So whenever he came up with a good one, he'd write it down. And so he had that notebook with him during this movie.
My God.
And so a lot of his one-liners came from what would have been, promo material or something like that. So like the "I'm here to chew bubblegum and kick ass," like that was him.
That's so funny.
But then also "Mama don't like tattletales" is also him, So like,
that's one I don't feel like
it's hit
people
and miss,
quote
but
enough.
Man, is he committed to it,
Well, I just always respect when an actor understands the assignment is the thing, and you can tell that he went in there being someone with a wrestling background, and you could tell Carpenter was just like, "Yep, go for it," and that is also validated in every single interview you read. It's just like, he was supposed to kind of be over the top. And Carpenter's just like, yeah, that's great.
Go for it, man.
You look like your head fell in the cheese dip back in 1957.
Just to use the genius of Roddy Piper in this movie to transition to what I think we can all agree is the next brilliant moment.
The bank?
The fight scene.
Oh, my God.
Right?
The fight scene.
Like, the bank is awesome, right? But the bank is just like... It's the grocery store. It's like the next iteration of that. That whole sequence is excellent, right? But like that fight scene, I don't think could exist without half of it being a wrestler.
I mean, he suplexes him at one point. There are actual wrestling moves in there, and but it was apparently they actually hit each other a little bit. They actually kind of kicked each other's asses. Like it was a wrestling match. Yeah. But it's 6 minutes and change of the most brutal, and it's dirty and grimy. You can feel the dirt on the ground there. Like they get dirtier. Like they're all bleeding and limping. Nothing is graceful or just, even though they did choreograph it for a week or whatever it was. Like it looks like two dudes just beating the shit out of each other, and it's all because one guy wants the other guy to put on sunglasses. But that's forgetting for a second what sunglasses represent or what the narratively or whatever. But if you just look at this in a vacuum of just like, we're going to get into a brutal fight because I want you to put these sunglasses on.
Well, also while we're complimenting the actors, I feel like that's what works so well about Keith David in this movie. He is like the perfect straight man, because here he is like just trying to be a good dude and give him his paycheck. And he ends up in a 6-minute fight in an alley because sunglasses. Like, that's so funny to me. Like, I love Keith David in this.
Yeah, he's excellent. And I mean, but that's like the brilliant part of this fight, and also like the brilliant conceit of this movie, right? Because this is a 6-minute fight about two people one guy trying to make another guy wear sunglasses, which is patently absurd. But when you think about it, right, this fight has to go on so long because, like, you got to understand, like
he's got to snap him out of it.
Yeah, because whether we know it or not, we're all brainwashed into thinking that, like, the American dream is still possible, and this is just like a slow slog of a fight to just try and break a man down in order to show him that he is being exploited.
I mean, this fight is this movie.
Yeah.
To me.
Oh my God,
the whole
yes.
Fight is like, this is the whole movie. It's angry and violent, and it's absurd when you look at it, out of context. But it's just so good.
We were talking before we aired. We were talking about like the South Park. I think I used the word parody, but I'm going to say homage because it's very clearly like an homage. Sure, yeah. You can do a side by side. But what I like too is because we were talking about earlier about the music and how it's maybe not one of John Carpenter's best scores. I love that this scene doesn't have any. I think that was the smartest move they could have done. You just feel you just like hear every punch. And like the escalation is so good because they start kind of like clean faced, and then at the end they're just. Actually, one of my favorite parts of the entire scene is the very end when they're walking away and they're just like, yeah, they hit like so tired. And I do think this is also like, not to get too deep about it, but I think this is also kind of like, would this have happened if John Carpenter wasn't operating at the height of his powers? Like, I can see an executive being like, hey, John, maybe cut the 6-minute fight scene down. But I think at that point...
Well, but I don't think that the executives had much of a... They only spent $3 million.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think you get final cut for $3 million.
Yeah, you pretty much do whatever you want.
But just the fact that they spent so much time on it. Like, for a movie that's made on the cheap, to spend 5 days on anything is a big commitment. The fact that they rehearsed it a bunch and that they spent a lot of time filming it. In the question about, like, how much credit do you want to give to this movie? In terms of how, like, this is one of those things. It's like, this is evidence why you have to give it all of the credit. I think
it's a good scene.
I agree because
it's a big bet to place in the middle of a movie, and they did it, and it panned out. To
your point, I can't imagine that like this is figured out in the screenplay. Like I can't imagine that this fight in the screenplay is 6 pages. Oh, yeah. You know, like this is a thing where like maybe you trust Roddy Piper to be like, hey, can you help me choreograph this fight? And then like Roddy and Keith David go out, he shows him some moves, and he's just like, he's like the enthusiastic kid that overdoes the assignment. So it's like them giddy, just like trying to show Carpenter the fight scene. And it's like, guys, I needed this to be like 3 minutes, like 2 minutes. And then they're like, no. And then he like watches it, and it as he's like watching this thing go on and go on and go on and go on, like those like serendipitous moments of genius start to hit you, and they're just like, wait a second. Maybe this does need to be 6.
Like, what if it was 3? It would be so stupid.
Yeah,
right. Well, that's the thing. It's like, what do you think? Because in talking about the point of this scene, and we've all talked like this scene it's a microcosm of the whole movie, and this scene is a representative of how you have to beat the shit out of people to get them to realize they're being hypnotized, and all of these things. All the point of this fight scene, right? Like, how do you decide what that runtime is?
I think that's what style is.
I don't know that. Yeah, right. But and it's just knowing.
Yeah.
There's no round number that's in a textbook anywhere. That's like, well, if you want to really make a point, it's got to be longer than 4 minutes. Like, no. Like it's you have to think that they got into the edit and they were like, this fight scene is 5 minutes long, and they're like, you know what? I'm not getting it yet. Let's put another minute back into it. Like I wonder what that process was. Just like landing on the final runtime of this fight scene.
But
because it's honestly like, this is the highlight of the entire movie.
It's the 6-minute fight scene, and I came here to kick ass and chew bubblegum. Like that's what that's truly from this. What I also love too is, like, again, just to praise Roddy and Keith. Obviously, Roddy is like a professional wrestler, knows what he's doing. But I was reading some interview with Keith David, and he was just talking about how much, like, it was like his favorite thing he's done, and like how much fun they were having. Like, it looks terrible, and sometimes you'll watch that and then you'll read interviews about like, oh my God, and it was raining and we were in pain and I was bleeding.
He's so proud of it.
He's so proud of it, and I love that. Like, that makes me enjoy it more to watch it, and you can like. When you watch it with that mindset, you can kind of tell that they're like taking it seriously, but also just kind of having the time of their lives in this 6-minute fight scene.
They also shot most of it on a Steadicam rig of some kind. which made things harder. Like, but it's also it's not overlit. It's not stylized in any particular way. Like, it's just very,
it's supposed to feel really grounded, I feel. Except for I do love that the scene begins with Keith David really smoothly throwing that money into the box. Like,
yes.
Just tickle. He was like 10 feet away.
I made that.
So
I made that note too. I wrote. Well, I wonder how many takes that was.
Yeah, it might have been the hardest. Because
there's a chance that there's a chance that was 4 of the 5 days of shooting the sequence. But maybe it took him 10 takes, or I think the only 2 options was it took a while, or he improv that and he nailed it in one.
Oh yeah,
and everybody's like, "Holy shit, what just happened?"
I choose to believe the latter.
I feel like it's only one of those 2 options.
I wanted it to keep going too. I don't know. It's such a good scene.
And it's the big turning point, right? Because now he's not alone against the world. He's got an ally. No. They're alone against the world together, and then we start moving into. This is where the movie starts to get a little plot heavy, because now it's like, well, we got to hatch a plan to bring these down, and I'm so much less interested in that than I am the rest of everything that we've talked about so far.
Before we get into that, could we discuss my increasingly complicated relationship with Meg Foster's character in this film?
It's complicated?
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about the character who has more or less your job title?
Yeah, it's extremely complicated.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, I didn't think so.
She's what is it? She's assistant programming director, and you're director of programming.
I'm the senior director.
You're Holly. Sorry. Oh my god.
So when I'm in college, just like watching this movie, just being like, yeah, the man. This is
no, here you are.
This is
You're the man now,
this is awesome. Like the fact that we managed to weasel our way into jobs in the media in the first place is just like, sure. I genuinely consider like one of the luckiest things to ever happen to me. And the fact that like the turncoat, the evil person who the sellout, the sympathizer, is none other than one of us.
It's you specifically.
Is none other than one of us. It's just it hurts my soul. And what kills me is she's an associate director, and look at her house. I can't.
She's got a good car.
Yeah,
she's got a house in the hills.
She's got a Beamer, a house in the hills. We have collectively sold our souls for so much less than that.
Hey, speak for yourself.
I don't think that she's even sold out yet. This is like, what's his name? Yeah. The magazine editor in The Fly driving around in a Maserati. Like,
there was just so
publishing
much
paid different back then.
But it's just wild that again, this woman is a manifestation of the media, and like she's like a core part of it, and it's funny to me, and it complicates my relationship to this film in a really, really, really funny way, because that is our field of profession as well, and I think it's.
But I think that's maybe why I'm so disappointed in that whole character and that whole subplot. I feel like they could have done that so much better. But this character is so unnecessary. Like, she doesn't have any real characterization other than, I work in the media and I seem sketchy now, but then I'm good, but then I'm bad. That twist is so unfulfilling at the very end. I was like, okay, really? And I don't know if she's supposed to be a love interest. I don't know what she said. Like, this is the most underbaked part of this movie. And it could have been something really special where they kind of really dig into those themes of like the media and being complicit. That's something I'm very interested in as someone with a journalism degree. But I feel like they totally fumbled the ball with the Holly character.
Well, I do think, like, to me, there's a runtime issue in that, right?
Yeah.
Like, this movie is a tight 94 minutes, something
so cut
like that,
that
right?
slog of like first
brisk.
30. That's what I'm saying.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. It's like when, and also in reading some of the reviews that, the contemporary reviews when it came out, a lot, you're sounding just like them. A lot of them were they docked this movie points because some of the more interesting ideas were just kind of like looked at from across the room, and then we went back over here to the shootout, particularly in the back half of this movie. I think the back half of this movie is half as interesting as the first half. Yeah. But yeah, that's part of the deal. It's one of those things where, do you pull that character out altogether, or do you spend 10 extra minutes digging into the significance of that character and her role in all this, and the complicity of station managers, in all of this. Like, And I think the answer was they just weren't super interested.
Yeah.
In that part of it. I think mostly Carpenter's whole goal was just like, wake up, you dummies. Like
that's the thing. So take her. That's why I would take her out altogether. Like you said, take her out altogether, or give 10 extra minutes to her.
Honestly, you can cut straight from him running away from the cops to him curling up in that tunnel after the sequence with her.
Yeah.
The only other thing you get is at the very end, the twist at the end where she kills.
Yeah, I think
which is a moment that I do want to flag as being pretty sharp. But that's the tail end. We haven't gotten to the end yet.
I also do. As much as I've crapped on this whole thing, it did give one of my biggest laughs in the movie is when she just smashes the vase, I think it is, over Roddy's head too. And just throws him out the window. And he's surprisingly not that bad after it. That made me laugh so hard. I don't know.
So what do you do?
Assistant program director. Cable 54.
What else do we want to talk about in the back half of this movie?
I think I don't have too much to say about it, but I feel like one of the more famous scenes is when they walk into the dinner.
Yeah.
And you see the kind of like the veil is fully taken off, and it explains to you in very clear terms what's happening, which is certain humans have aligned with the aliens because actually this isn't this exact scene, but I think one of the best the more profound lines of this movie that isn't like kind of campy, that is actually like kind of okay, is when the guy whose name escapes me later when he's
billed as like Drifter. So
but
like, he's another character that just doesn't have a name.
Yeah, when he's like kind of defending himself and he says like they're gonna win anyway, why not be on the winning side? Like I think that's actually a really great line.
And that line actually he's got a run there, and part of that line he says, let me see, I wrote it down. What's the threat? We all sell out every day.
Yeah.
That line.
That's kind of a banger.
But that line was straight from a studio exec to John Carpenter.
Yeah.
Giving feedback on the movie. Like, they were like, I don't understand, what's the threat with this? We all sell out. What's the point? And it's just like, that's the point, you f***ing idiot.
That's oh my God.
If you're saying that to me right now, you're the bad guy of my movie. Like, that's the point. And so he lifted that line straight from a studio exec and put it in the movie.
That's hilarious. John Carpenter has never given one single in his entire life. He doesn't even know the meaning of the expression. No. Oh my God. But I totally believe that too, because that is something like a callous studio exec would say. Like, I don't know if you've listened to the earnings calls like I have, but sometimes they do say the quiet part out loud.
Well, and I mean, look at, where the last bit of this movie is set is in the Biltmore Hotel or whatever, the ballroom, and then a studio.
Yep. The only thing that really sticks out to me in the end is Roddy's last shot where, he's dying, and with his last bit of energy, he flips them the bird.
Oh, I do like that.
Which is incredible. And
I also like that he has to pull his arm up with his other arm too, which is great.
To flip the bird. Because like when I think
important too.
Yeah, what I like about that is like there's a quote he told the Los Angeles Times in 2013, which is basically like, by the late 80s, I'd had enough and I decided to make a statement. As stupid and banal as it is, but I made one, and that's they live. I just love that it was giving the finger to Reagan when no one else would. And
he's very literal, isn't he?
It's very manifest, and
that's the whole movie. Yeah. It's very literal. We're not like, this is a message that we're not sending subliminally.
Yeah.
Like this needs to be explicit and needs to be on the surface.
And then it cuts to like 2 shots later where it says no independent thought, and it's literally just like Siskel and Ebert, like the Siskel and Ebert proxies just like complaining.
Yeah.
Oh no, and they actually say this George Romero and John Carpenter, they need to cool it with the violence already. Yeah. Like meta before meta was cool. Got to give it to him. And it ends so abruptly too. Like, I was kind of surprised because I was, like, watching it on Amazon, and Amazon kind of, like, starts hitting you with next things you should watch. I was like, I haven't even gotten to the credits yet. It's like big reveal, immediately credits.
Because you know what, like, the best part about that is? It ends at the best moment of which is, like, now people know.
Yeah.
And there's not an unspoken thing that happens where they might not change.
No, that's the vibe I got. I was like, they're just gonna keep doing their thing, I think, and just see the aliens though.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course he does sneak in a pair of breasts right there at the end. The very last thing.
Again,
which
by
actually
this point, like I was already getting recommendations.
Yeah. Which that's actually a frame straight from the comic book adaptation. The comic book that John Carpenter bought to make They Live from. One of the last frames of that. It's only like 7 pages, but one of the last frames is that sex scene. Is a woman on top of an alien. She's like, what? But yeah, no, I think that's the funniest part, Cal, is there's nothing in this last little montage at the end to say that like people are even upset by this. Like I think they're surprised, but that's it.
Yeah.
Like we don't get to see any sort of like, well, now we're gonna revolt, or like, oh my God, let's rise up.
Big systemic change.
That crazy guy was right. Or, nope.
So
none of that's gonna happen.
I feel like again that's actually more like prescient about today. I feel like we're also used to seeing so much crazy shit constantly, and we're just like on to the next one.
I do think though, before I had mentioned Keith David's death and Holly's character showing up just in time to do that, for as much like cannon fodder as in the last 5 or 10 minutes of this movie, they're just like walking into rooms with Uzis, and like it's that wonderful 80s like turn around, shoot from the hip, and just like spray a gun everywhere.
Which by the way, he did that in the bank, which had non-aliens, which cracked me up.
He did that. Yeah, he did that all over the place.
Yeah.
But when they kill Keith David, and this is one thing, like one really great bit of restraint in this movie is how they film Keith David dying, which is she walks up behind him, holds the gun up. There's a sound of a gunshot, and then a single, just plain white frame for the muzzle flash. It's just one. I stepped through it just to be sure. It's one frame that's just white, and that's the muzzle flash. And we don't see him. He doesn't do that. That these other soldiers that die, like they and then fall and they roll and they like that whole standard I just got shot death. Like they don't make Keith David do it. I'm glad that they filmed it that way with a certain amount of restraint. And I wonder like how it looked on the day when they shot it. Like how far did they take that? I wonder if he did get shot and fall and roll and all that stuff, and then they cut it later, or if that was always the plan. But anyway, I just thought it was a tasteful way to go.
That's
I think in this movie.
Funny because I almost had the opposite initial reaction. I thought he deserved something. I thought he deserved his own middle finger moment.
Sure.
Because I think more than any other character in this entire movie, Frank, that's the Keith David character, Frank goes through more change than anyone. Like he is the character who has to be kind of shaken out of his day-to-day complacency for him to like go through that 6-minute fight scene and eventually come on to the side of the Roddy character. I feel like he really went through it in this movie, and he's like the only character who I actually kind of believed. And he had like a blink and you miss it death. I actually found that a little disappointing. Although I do see your point about it's a nice lead up to the twist of her being on the side of the aliens, but I don't know. I thought Frank deserved his own middle finger.
No, I can see that, but I just appreciate that we didn't have to see him flop around.
Yeah, that's fair. I wouldn't have liked it.
Like,
yeah,
that's the big thing. Like he deserved that less than any of the other options that we've talked about.
That's fair.
So.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about movie lists. Outside of some honorable mentions in some places, this hasn't appeared on many, but we did Things You Didn't Know about it back a handful of years ago. We did a What's the Difference on it. Did a one-off video about They Live and The Truman Show kind of being the same movie.
Oh.
Did that way back. But it hasn't shown up on any movie. Oh, the one it did show up on was the one of our most iconic lines of all time list. I think the second one that we did, the 100 more of the most iconic lines of all time, I think is what it was. It was of course the bubblegum and kicking ass line. But otherwise,
I don't know. But
where did I blow it? Where does it need to go?
This would be on just based on its ranking on my list. It would be on every list that it could possibly be on, right? Because it's
but like that's I think that's
best movies
sci-fi, like political movies.
It did get an honorable mention on political movies, or will. To be honest, I can't remember when political movies is going to be dropping, but it might be this week.
Conspiracy movies.
I think I suggested a list about movies about media or journalism in the Anchorman episode. I mean, this isn't about media or journalism, but honorable mention maybe.
It's
kind of about
it
media.
is.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
There's a fun list in best wrestlers turned actors, I feel.
Yeah. Well, what other movie would we talk about besides this one?
It's pretty iconic of him.
I mean, yeah, there's no other wrestlers that became
No, he's the only
famous, right?
That's true.
It's just this. It's just Roddy Piper.
Yeah.
You just play
Hulk
the movie
Hogan and
as the
Suburban
video.
Commando, but we don't even. Yeah, exactly. See if the bots will leave us alone for that one.
What about schlock? Have we ever done schlocky, like top 10, like schlocky or
Like
B
B
movies?
movies?
Yeah.
Or
That'd be a fun list.
no, we haven't. That'd be fun. Yeah.
Alien movies. Do we have an alien movie list? I like that'd be good.
Alien
don't.
invasion movies?
Alien and Alien Invasion, I think, were part of the sci-fi list.
But there's a lot of alien movies. I feel like that's enough of a subgenre.
Yeah.
I mean, you got E.T.
This,
all kinds of stuff.
What was that one that Ridley Scott made?
This
I
one.
can't recall the name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a new one out. I forget what it's called, though.
Who knows? I think Romulus is the
Yeah.
name, but I can't think of the rest.
It was E.T., I think, right?
Yeah, E.T.
E.T. Romulus.
E.T. Romulus. The distant sequel to E.T. where he comes back on that ship and just murders everybody.
I would watch the hell out of that.
That would be incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out that E.T. was just like the one shy member of his alien species, and everybody else.
It just took him a while to come into his own.
Yeah, no, he was just scared the whole time, and
Yeah.
then he gets back with his people, and he's like, "All right, let's go.
Mask
Teach
off,
you to put
bitches.
me in a weird bubble tube." Shall we torf?
Yes.
Oh, okay. True or false? The role of Nada, but I don't think we've said this. Nada was the Roddy Piper.
yeah.
They say it in the
Roddy
credits.
Piper. Yeah.
The role of Nada was originally written for Kurt Russell. True or false?
I want to say false.
True. I'm gonna say true because Carpenter wanted to make this movie for a while, and like I was talking about earlier, he couldn't quite nail it. And then when he met Roddy Piper, he was like, "Oh yeah, no, that's
Got it.
That's Nada right there." So I'm gonna say yes, true.
Okay. Cal? So false?
I'm going to go false.
Okay. Clint is correct.
Oh.
It was originally written for Kurt Russell. John Carpenter felt like he should cast someone else after casting Russell in 4 of his films prior to this one: Elvis, Escape from New York, The Thing, and Big Trouble in Little China. I mean, Kurt Russell wouldn't have been terrible.
No, I feel like it would have hewed too close to Big Trouble in Little China. Like that's kind of his role in that movie too.
Yeah.
Is stumbling into a world he didn't know about.
I feel like at this time, probably Mel Gibson would have been the best like A-list analog for what Roddy Piper was, what Roddy Piper managed to accomplish.
Yeah, but I
Coming
really
off
like
a
that
Lethal
it.
Weapon.
Yeah.
I like that it wasn't an A-list list.
Oh, I do
actor,
too.
though. That's
I
part
think
of
it's
the
great.
thing I love about it.
Also,
yeah.
like, I don't ever want to. I would hate to rewatch this movie with Mel Gibson.
Oh yeah, that's
too.
the curse of all of it.
Yeah. I like if we were like, who's the A-list star to do Nada? I think it would have been Mel in the late 80s.
You know who would have been good also A-list wise is Bruce Willis.
Yeah.
I mean, not to jump ahead,
Bruce
but
Willis could have done it.
Nick Cage,
He was too pretty at that time.
he was a little pretty.
He was
Yeah,
too
he
pretty.
wasn't rough and tumble enough.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
That was in his pretty phase.
Yeah.
He was
so
very pretty back
stricken from the
then.
record.
Back in like the late 80s.
Yeah.
He was. Anyway, we'll talk more about him later. Okay. True or false? The big fight sequence was designed, rehearsed, and choreographed in John Carpenter's backyard.
True.
Yeah, sure, true.
Yeah.
I know they rehearsed it and designed it for a while, but I don't know where they did it.
I feel a little bad about this one. It is false, but I feel like it's one of those where Tayo and I are maybe being a little too tricky.
Was it in Roddy Piper's backyard?
No, it was in the backyard of John Carpenter's production office. So it wasn't a backyard, but it was a commercial one and not a residential one. So
All right. You know what? No, we got that.
It
one
was a
right.
yard or a parking lot.
it was a yard.
It was John Carpenter's backyard. It
Yeah.
was just John Carpenter's studio's backyard.
Yeah, I'll give that one too. But there's an
Okay.
interesting aside in here, because we were wondering how you figure out how long the scene lasts for 6 minutes. Apparently, it was only supposed to last 20 seconds, but Piper and David decided to fight it out for real, only faking the hits to the face and groin. And then, they rehearsed it for 3 weeks. But yeah, imagine 20 seconds of this fight.
Doesn't do it.
Doesn't do it. I feel like this movie would have just
nothing for this movie.
Yeah, been lost to history if it had a 20-second fight scene. 20-minute though, I would watch.
Sure.
All right, I'll give you a gimme for that one. Now Clint has one. Cal's at 0. True or false? They Live's props were recycled from other movies.
True.
True. Yeah. I mean, it's a $3 million budget. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go low budget.
Yeah.
No, you're going true. I'm. You know what? I'm gonna go false, just because I feel like we might be referring to all the magazine covers and stuff like that.
That had to be custom.
Not all the
That's
props.
not props though. That's
Yeah.
production design. So I don't know. I'm still going false, just cause.
No, that's true. Low
Yeah,
budget,
I
man.
knew it.
Yeah.
The PKE meter from Ghostbusters was used by alien troops. According to Carpenter, the film was so low budget that they rented various things from prop houses, and that's how they got those devices. According to Piper, Big Trouble and Little China is responsible for the sunglasses at the center of the story. So even the sunglasses were
From
There you
another
go.
movie.
yeah recycled. They couldn't even get a pair of
another
sunglasses on that $3 million budget.
It's because they spend it all on choppers.
Yeah, there were a few. There
Honestly,
were a few.
choppers and black and white film tests.
Yeah. Okay. Last Torf. One guy played every alien.
Oh, true.
I'll go true, but specifically because
There's more than one alien in scenes, in shots.
It wouldn't surprise me if it was one guy because they could only afford to make one mask.
guy. One
But
guy.
there are multiple.
Even playing
There
the
are
women.
shots with
One guy. Every alien.
false.
False.
It's totally false because
Yeah.
there are shots with multiple aliens in them.
Well, you're right. It's false, but that it's closer to true than you might think.
I would say they had like maybe two
Imagine-
people, and there was a
Yeah.
one.
So-
like there was a one on the alien call sheet and a 2 on the alien.
Right.
Yeah.
So like the film stunt coordinator Jeff Amata, he played most of them. But according to Amata, Carpenter originally hired actors to play the ghouls in the film, but wasn't too happy with the male actor in particular, and asked Amata to start doubling. I would assume that like maybe they had a woman play the woman ghouls, but still mostly one guy.
Because there's that shot in the grocery store where there's 4 or 5 of them.
Yeah.
Like, walking
Well,
up,
in
talking
the
into their-
elite dinner scene, like there's a few of them seen.
Right.
Still cool though. Imagine being that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I was almost
I
every.
wonder if
ghoul.
he gets to keep the mask.
Oh. No, they needed it for his next film.
They made him buy it.
Yeah.
The toupees were famous toupees from other movies.
That is
Probably.
funny to think
There's
about.
got to be a wig shop that they just wandered into and were like.
I mean,
don't
they
know,
did say they
we'll
just
take these.
they went around renting things.
Are you gonna buy some wigs or ain't you?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
All right. Well, who is your MVP?
Oh,
Roddy.
Roddy.
Come on.
Roddy, without question.
It's Roddy.
Yeah.
Dude, do you have Carpenter? Because I considered it.
I'm putting Carpenter down as, well, I guess technically Frank Armitage,
Yeah.
his pseudonym for the writing. But I'm putting it down as the writing because the adaptation process of this I think is really interesting. Going from like the short story was 1,800 words, which is shorter than most of the videos that we put up. The graphic novel adaptation was in an anthology and it was only 7 pages, and like. It's such a cool exercise in taking a good idea, just like one small short story idea, and then like grafting it onto real, like we talked about this whole time, real political relevance and real sort of statements and everything. So like getting 90 minutes out. Granted, the first 30 are kind of a slog, so let's call it getting
Call a spade a
75
spade. Come on.
really good minutes. Getting 75 to 90 good minutes out of this is pretty remarkable, I think. But I'm outvoted, so.
Yeah, so like I think sometimes we talk about like it being hard not to give the MVP to the director.
It always kind of
time.
like defaults to the director.
Yeah, but it's like
Yeah.
I go back to like our Blade Runner episode where it's like I had notes for Villeneuve, but I didn't have notes for Deakins. I have notes for Carpenter. No notes for Roddy. He crushed it.
He did it.
He did what he was supposed to do. I don't have any good.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. That's a fair point.
So sticking with Roddy.
No, that's fine. I was probably just picking Carpenter to be different. But where are we putting Nicolas Cage? I do think there's a version of this movie, if you remake it with him as Nada, that's pretty good.
Like present day Nick Cage, yeah.
I don't think a young Nick Cage would work in this movie at all.
I don't think he would get dirty enough,
no.
like in the fight scene and stuff. Yeah.
Well, it goes back to what Carpenter said about Piper. Is like he needs to look like he's lived, and you have to be. I mean, there's just an age factor, and regardless of how pretty you are, Nicolas Cage in 1988 had not lived the way that Roddy Piper had. So
I think an old Nicolas Cage could be the preacher. Like a modern Nicolas Cage could be the preacher.
Where I had put him, just because I actually didn't really have a good place to put him. This is one of those movies for me. But where I did put him was the nameless guy at the end who's trying to sell them on the whole thing, the drifter or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that it's kind of a cameo, but
yeah. Well, because that's the thing about this movie is there's not really an antagonist.
Yeah.
Like
as a singular entity.
To, you know?
yeah.
Right.
Nick Cage
So
can't
there's
play
not
Society.
one-
Sure, he could.
Don't tell him that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, anybody outside of Nada would be kind of a cameo.
Yeah, like I was thinking about him in maybe like Keith David's place. Absolutely not. I feel like you need a real like.
He's not one of the mains.
No.
No.
I mean, yeah, like you were saying, Clint. Maybe if you remade it, I could get down with that.
This is a movie that I'm simultaneously confused and not surprised at all that it's not been remade.
If they remade this movie, I think it would suffer for the same reason that every Verhoeven classic that was remade has also failed, which is like it'll like not have the core essence of like the subversive like humor and just like that schlocky charm that exists in They Live, RoboCop, and like, you know, Starship Troopers, stuff like that. Like, I think that's a core part that makes these films successful and like Total Recall as well. And I don't think it would work as well. Like, we've lost that humor in our modern filmmaking.
I think if you were to do it, yeah, like you said, it wouldn't have the humor. But I think if you were to do it, there is something to kind of go back to what I was saying earlier about like tackling this from a modern perspective and social media. I think you could do it in that kind of way. And I could see someone like a Jordan Peele kind of taking like a fun approach to that while still being very...
I'd like to think Jordan Peele loves this movie.
Yeah.
I feel like he does. I could see that.
I don't need it. This isn't me advocating for it.
Yeah.
I'm just surprised that it you know, it's got that B movie appeal, but it also requires a little bit of self-awareness that, like Cal was saying, I don't think we have that much, nearly as much anymore.
And if we do, it's really obnoxious.
And honestly, that's fine. If at the end of the day that means we never get a They Live remake, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I still have a copy of They Live that I can watch. All right, let's talk about where it ranks. I'll go first. I had it at 62 on my list. And I'm told Dan didn't have it anywhere on
That makes sense because it's a good movie.
I actually am surprised by
this
that.
Is
I
not
thought
a Dan-ass movie.
That
It
this was
feels
kind
a
of a
little
Dan-
like a
yeah,
Dan-ass
it does.
movie, but it turns out it's not.
Cal,
Where'd you have it, Cal?
is it in your top 10?
Oh, yeah. It's in my top 5.
Top 5?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. If you followed me on Letterboxd, this is in like my top 4. So that's why this is literally
Is it your 4?
Yeah, it's my 4.
That's very high.
Yeah, I can't emphasize enough how much I love this movie.
Clearly.
How hard it is to do something so culturally relevant on $3 million.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a masterclass in filmmaking, as far as I'm concerned. And in all of the things that I just like love. Sci-fi, love it. Like subversive media commentary, love it. Dumb
6-minute fight scenes,
love them.
Love it.
Dumb one-liners,
Looking
love
cool
'em.
in sunglasses.
Yep.
Love it.
Into it.
Cool use of fonts, awesome. Like what?
The graphic
Yeah.
design
Appreciate
in
the
this
list of
movie
things that are in
is
this
on
movie.
point.
Yeah.
It's starting to get a little bit more of a stretch as you get farther down this list.
Cool fonts.
Cool fonts?
Cool font.
But into it.
Does hurt.
You got a cool font. I'm going to show up. Number 4 for you. Number 62 for me. Alex, you
Unless I
watched
went
it
back in time and added
yesterday,
it. Yeah, it's not gonna...
and so it's not on your list. I don't think it would have been anyway.
No.
But what is it, Kat? What do you think? That's got to put it in the 40s somewhere.
Yeah,
right?
probably.
I mean, I feel
2
like
lists.
I'd probably say-
a 4 is beefy.
top
for the algorithm.
So let's think of it this way. So our last episode was Anchorman, and I single-handedly got that on the list with an 11, and that was like what 67 or 76, I think.
Yeah.
So,
So-
yeah, it's something like that.
I think I got Uncut Gems single-handedly on the list at 93 at 8.
Yeah, and so 2 lists, very high for one.
I'll take the over at 40.
I'll say mid 40s.
I'm gonna go under. I'm gonna say 30. I'll just say 30. All right.
Right.
Is
Do
this
the honors.
the envelope?
There it is.
Excuse us, alien bust.
Yep.
Which, by the way, Tayo, thank you. Great work on that.
That's
Who
so
gets
good.
to keep who gets to? I mean, it's your number 4 movie, so you ought to keep that one, Cal.
For sure.
Yours.
Okay, we're all pretty much right, which is annoying. 35.
35.
Right
We
in
gotta
the middle of
start
us.
understanding this algorithm less,
Yeah.
or we need to tweak it
Well,
and
I
change
feel like
the
we do
entire
understand
list
it
all of a
really
sudden.
well now.
We'll have Dan change it.
It's almost kind of annoying that it like makes sense in a way. Like I kind of thought that Dan maybe just threw it all on a list, but apparently there is a method to it.
Well, I'm not gonna strike it.
I
Obviously,
can't
it's my
imagine-
it's
Cal's
my
not
number
gonna
4. Are you
strike
gonna
it.
strike your 63?
I'm not going to strike my 62 or 63. I already forgot where I had it.
No.
60,
No.
62.
I'm just gonna.
I'm not gonna.
Because you
I'm just
get
gonna-
You're just gonna see how it feels.
get no sense.
holding that
Well,
envelope.
the weight of it. Oh, I wonder what's in here. What we could-
Alex, you will
Possibly
indeed
a
be
better
alone
movie.
against the world.
Nothing.
If you wanna-
it'd be
if you
thematically
wanna
so
strike this,
good.
Nothing appropriate. Nothing better than that.
Oh, this could be,
There are no
this
better
could be
movie.
Revenge for Robin Hood. It could be revenge for the strike of Three Amigos, which wasn't
you're
even my
getting-
movie. We could get.
Yeah,
Oh.
you'd be getting revenge on my behalf for Three Amigos.
Mhm.
over
It could
this.
be revenge
They
for the
live.
Princess Mononoke slander.
No slander. That's an opinion.
Why shouldn't I? Why shouldn't
Because
elevator pitch? Elevator pitch.
because we just gushed about this movie for the last hour and a
So
half.
summarize it. 2 sentences.
2 sentences. A probably the most prescient political film about America made in the last 40 years. That's also funny.
I'll go even more brief than that. One of the smartest and simultaneously dumbest movies of all time.
Honestly, I think the reason I'm not going to strike it is not for a deep point, but for the point that you made earlier, Clint, about it needing to be stupid, it needing to be unsubtle, because the point is to yell at you and grab you by the shoulders. That kind of sold me on the movie.
Okay.
And before the cameras were rolling, I was leaning towards strike. In fact,
You were leaning strike.
I'm still thinking about it because I really like the Alone Against the World theme.
This thing.
Well, we each only get one strike for the season. I've already used mine.
It sounds
so I'm
like
out.
it's Alone Against Caliber out here.
This is also Clint's movie.
It's number 63 for Clint.
No. I wouldn't strike. Even if I had my strike left, I wouldn't
You know what?
dream of using it on They Live.
I don't think I could do that to you, Cal. It's your number
I
4.
appreciate
and
it.
that's what you said about. And you know what? You said the same about Princess Mononoke. So I will say that I'll leave
Well,
it
here's
on.
the thing, and this is one thing that you missed last week, Cal, when we were talking. You missed the part of the conversation where we talked about sort of the structure of this list and like what the list is. Because I had a hard, weird time letting Anchorman sneak by when I think it's not as good a movie objectively as Uncut Gems is but I was
agree to
powerless
disagree.
to do anything about it. But Alex you made the better point about like this is not an objective list by any means. This list is a sort of a reflection of all of us and Dan, I guess,
Yes.
as film fans.
Yeah.
And like what types of movies just the 4 of us like. And so that made me feel better about the whole thing.
Yeah.
That's it. That was that conversation.
So you're not
that you
striking it.
missed.
I'm not striking it. No.
I appreciate it. From the bottom of my heart.
I genuinely was thinking about it like all day before this episode. I was like, am I going to use my one strike?
You're welcome, by the way, Cal, for making the argument that saved your 4th favorite movie of all
It
time.
was
by the
Clint's
way.
argument. I was like, you know what? It does need to be kind of stupid. I get it. Like,
I totally agree. There's genius in stupidity.
Oh, I'm not going to argue.
Yeah.
Again, I'm the one who got Anchorman on the list.
In smartly deployed stupidity.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
you know what? I leave
right.
it on the list and I don't even feel bad about it.
Oh,
logs
great.
there.
I wouldn't want you to feel bad about it.
Who would?
But that will do it for us this week. Thank you for watching They Live with us, Alex. We really appreciate it.
I had a good
Honestly,
time,
any
despite
excuse-
everything I said. I had a good time.
It's a great time.
Yeah,
I know.
It's a great
We can
time.
tell. It's a great time.
It's a great time.
Yeah.
But any excuse to watch They Live is a good one as far as I'm concerned. So, but let me also use this opportunity to remind you to obey producer Tayo Oyekin. Submit to technical producers Mariah Franzen and Amir Rakib. Marry and reproduce with DP Jamie Parslow. And Dan can just stay asleep. Just stay asleep, Dan.
Dan's a collaborator. Let's just get.
Oh, big time.
Yeah, he's a big time collaborator.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The worst one.
He's got too many adjectives in his job title to not be colluding. But join us next week when we dive into another pulpy 80s classic, The Naked Gun from the Files of Police Squad. I like this season, honestly.
It's a roller coaster.
Great movies that we're watching this
Yeah.
season. I really like it. All right, well, until then, stay asleep, obey, and we'll see you next time.